Okay, we are ready.
Great. Welcome to the February 10th, 2025 meeting of the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee. My name is Steve Perez and I'm the Vice Chair of the committee. Tonight we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Burke. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Do I have someone to take minutes for today? Anyway,
I'm swamped with land use stuff.
I have 2 clients from out of town this week.
I mean, I can take them, I just didn't, bring a pen and paper with me, I'll watch the YouTube and do it.
Thank
Work
you.
it back and forth, that'd be
We'll send, you know, you'll send it to, they'll send it to you.
Yeah, send it, so it's fine. Yeah, I can do it.
Thank you, Rush.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So now,
Yeah.
now we'll take attendance.
Okay. Committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Tanya Arias,
Present.
Jim Collins,
Here.
Dee Nisman,
Present.
Rob Farfan,
Present.
Nat Kalani.
Here, sorry, I'll be on camera in a second. I'm just an Uber.
Sounds good. Ava Marie Lassiter,
Present.
David Lowenstein.
I just saw him.
I did see him, so David is counted as present. Reshma Patel
Present.
and Steve Perez.
Present.
We have a quorum. Whoops. There we go.
Great. So the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time at the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there's no objection, we'll adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Now, the only question I had was, are we still discussing agenda item number 2? Because I think we had a question about that.
I'm okay to punt it because I want to focus on 1, and I think it will take us some time because we didn't get too many responses from the committee. So why don't we just move 2 to like can figure out when we want to do it, and then just spend the time today on 1 and just make sure we're thoughtful about all the topics.
Okay, great. So, seeing the modifications, we now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. The minutes from the January 13th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If yet there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the January 13th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CV6 website. So in order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties that you're having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud in record on the meeting. So we will move directly to the first agenda item, which is our discussion of the preliminary budget, FY26 preliminary budget documents, which are the responses that we received for the various city agencies to all of our budget requests. Nat, I don't know if you wanted to take us through that first.
I think I don't know if folks have had a chance to review it, but I think what would really be the best way to do this is first go through anything relevant like to budget. I think we only have a couple, and then we can sort of tick through the rest broadly. We didn't get too many committee responses, so I think it's sort of going to be on us, unfortunately. But I think we can really, I would say, focus on the top 10 because I know those are what we decided in the fall were priorities for us as a committee, how we want to respond to those. And then I think I got one response just a few, like maybe an hour ago from Stu. So I can review that quickly and I can bring that up. But I think why don't we start with the budget ones, then go through the top 10, and then I can include that as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. So Brendan, if you could pull up the
Yeah.
budget tables so we can sort of see them. First, filter it so that we can just see the budget and governmental affairs
Okay.
requests. So we had two requests on there that were expense requests,
Yeah, just give
actually
me.
from our committee.
I mean, we got much better responses
Yeah.
this time than we did in the past, so I was like, when I read
Yeah,
that, I was like,
I was
wow,
impressed.
because usually they don't give us
So yeah,
such positive responses, so it's great.
that's a great observation. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
Freshman, I don't know if it just happened to be who read our responses this year, or, you know, this year we did make a concerted effort to like winnow down
Yeah.
our requests, so there weren't as many. But also we really went through them and cleaned them up.
Yeah.
So they weren't just repeating old requests. that
Yeah,
had
this
been
is
on
the
there for
first
years,
time
so-
I'm seeing it, and I was impressed. I was like, oh.
Yeah, usually they just give us like
Oh.
no answer, like agency can't support right now, right, agency can't support right now, so this was really interesting that there are so many.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one we have is related to municipal facilities for CV6, I believe.
I can't see it.
Sorry, Brendan, can you move the window because we can't see?
Where would you like me to do right now?
Just move that window because I can't see the
Oh, yeah.
title.
Yeah.
Isn't that item 7 regarding our
Oh,
state?
No, and the title of the thing.
Yes,
Okay,
the
municipal
municipal-
facilities for CV6. Yeah, so now pull up the response so everybody can see it.
That was the one I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it says we don't have they support it, but cannot accommodate. DCAS does not have a conceptually approved space request for this. The community board should submit a space request to DCAS OMB. And then it shows the person that we should contact for completing a space request form. So I guess my first question is, Brendan, are you aware, have we ever submitted this form? Jesus or anybody from the office, are you aware of what this is?
No. I am not aware of what this is. I wouldn't be surprised if Jesus is, given that, like, for those of you who've been around longer, there's apparently a pretty arduous process to find an office space, before my time. So Jesus might be aware of such a form, but I am not.
When we moved from the 13th precinct here,
Yeah,
by the police academy.
Yeah,
Well,
but this is, so one, I've not seen this, and this request we've had before, so
Yeah.
since I've been on, which is I think 2018. But this contact is what nonprofits reach out to when they want space, because as we've talked about in the past, the city does provide spaces to nonprofit service providers in the city, so it's basically putting us in that category.
Yeah.
With DCAF.
Eva Marie.
So I think we all honed in on that one when we looked. But since we submitted that we've been requesting since 2018, there is absolutely no record that we filled out a space request form. Do you think that this is something new that to put us on hold even longer?
Why don't we just move forward and email Hannah Marcus
Yeah.
and immediately request a space request form?
I know, but it's that we've been requesting this since 2018. It
Well, I like
seems
to
that a
backtrack.
space- I want to know.
I don't know
if
how
it
long it's been on
existed.
there. I just been on the committee since 2016. This request for the facilities has come up post the pandemic where we didn't have a space for meetings.
Yeah.
Because it's not for our office space that we needed to host our meetings.
No, I saw
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah,
to me, it sounds as if it's something new to put us on hold again. I mean, that no one has heard of the space request form. And they say it's a conceptually space request form. Are we supposed to even be even more elaborate than what's actually on the form? I just want to know if this is a new document or if this is a way to put us on hold and for some more time.
There's no way to, look, B, go ahead. B, you're.
You're
Trying to unmute me. So Jesus would really know this because when we moved, there were major work with DCAS. You have to work with DCAS to get space. And so that's part of the history. But I thought this was a little different. I thought this was supporting space for meetings and stuff, as opposed to space of us relocating the office. And if it's requesting for meetings and stuff, I was going to go back to look at what it was. I don't think we've ever done this formally, other than, talking to the council people and suggesting. So I think we need Jesus on this one to clarify whether we've done that for meetings. Am I correct that this is not just real where the office is, but holding meetings?
Yeah, it's my understanding that this was for the meeting space.
It's
Right,
both.
so that's different, because we work with DCAS for office space.
Yeah.
It's saying CB6 holds 11 meetings per month, so it's actually for the large meetings, but it sounds like our individual committee meetings, it's combining the two for this space request form.
Correct.
It's
So-
asking for 100 people, as many as 100 people, so I would assume it's a full board meeting and a couple of special interest meetings. So I think before we could respond, we have to know what Jesus has done and involved, but this is a pretty complete response from the agency.
Yeah, we even have a contact.
Yeah. So we can ask Jesus to follow.
Why don't we get hold of the form first and find out what all is in this conceptual plan that they're requesting.
Yeah, that's part of what we're asking. Jesus to
Another
do.
thing I would do is, we're almost 5 years now out of the pandemic. We might consider whether or not facilities such as NYU will reconsider whether or not they would allow us meeting space there.
So Nat, I think you and I can circle back with Jesus on this one.
Yeah, and I think
Get
this is
some clarity.
specifically the address mentioned here is the Spark space, which we've had
Yeah,
conversations, right? about.
right. We just wanted to make sure that was still
Yeah.
on the radar because it's a site that's
Yeah.
under development. Yeah. Go ahead.
So once we have a response from Jesus, would one of us contact Hannah Marcus? And
Most likely
request the
Jesus
space?
Yeah.
I see Jesus is on right
Jesus.
now,
Yeah.
so,
I'm sorry?
I see
Jesus is
Jesus is actually
on.
on right now, so.
My ears were burning.
I miss you.
You got ESP, Jesus.
No, I was sort of watching along on YouTube, so I think. Okay, so we did submit this form already. Keep in mind there can be a 2 or 3 month lag between the time these things are submitted and the time we get the responses. So in the interim, yeah, we did submit that space form. And we will contact Ms. Marcus to follow up. Well, actually, they confirmed that they got it. So what we need to contact them about actually is we would love for them to give us our own space, but we do know that there's some sort of policy that limits community board offices to a certain limited square footage. We think that even just in the space that we have now, the space that you're in right now, if we get rid of some things like filing cabinets that we have no use for anymore, given that we're going so paperless, we could fit more chairs in there and possibly maybe not reach, and certainly not reach 100, but maybe reach 60 seats in that space. And many people attend on Zoom, so we could sort of make it work with the space that we have. The problem is that this conversation is being had through this process and, months at a time. It's like sending a message off into space, intergalactically and waiting for it to come back, many months later. That's not the most efficient way. And we want them to sit in a room, talk to us so we can hash this out, because it may just be easier to refit or the space that we have now to add more seats than to maybe go through all the process of getting us a new space, which will only be about the same size as the one we have now.
Go ahead, Jim.
That
I didn't hear what that.
Have you been tracking the legislation that would allow for remote meetings if boards voted for them? Do we know what the status?
Say that one more time, please.
There was an assembly bill, from somebody here in Manhattan that would have allowed community boards to meet remotely at their option. You know what?
That hasn't been enacted into law. And the sponsor of that bill is one of our elected officials, Assemblymember Boris. And he occasionally keeps us updated on that, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. So, but again, I believe it was you, Jim, who mentioned we're 5 years on from the pandemic. So, maybe the board wants to talk about whether that's still something it wants to do. But the fact remains is that, I think, in-person meetings are, for all intents and purposes, back. The Zoom option, most people don't want to give up. So it does look like the future of community board meetings is going to be some sort of hybrid model for which we need a proper space. So we can, I can put this together in writing for you guys, and you can include it in your letter if that's helpful. But we are going to be talking to DCAS to see what we can do to make the best use of the space that we have now, but also seeing we would then need to work with our elected officials to see if they can push DCAS to loosen its requirements or its limitations rather for community board office space. Because as our understanding is, while that policy is in place, it's never going to get any bigger than the office is never going to be any bigger than what it is now. And somebody mentioned NYU. No, they will not have us anymore. So that still remains the policy.
Go ahead, Tanya.
I'm actually very much in favor of maybe redesigning this space. Do we have a place where we could store the paper files if need be, a secure place that they could be stored in so that the space can be opened up and reconfigured? I mean, I live in a studio and I've managed to divide it into 3 very livable sections. You can use the space a little better.
Right. Now, we did that from the beginning. They had initially thought, DCAS initially had thought to put the conference room, quote unquote, in that sort of glass enclosure where Brendan sits. And I was like, no, we need flip this around and make this bigger area where we would have been sitting the conference room area, because they don't design community board offices with that in mind. That said, there isn't a lot to store. We do have a contract, the city does have a contract with a facility that will house documents off-site, digitize them so we can have access to them that way. And if we ever need the paper version, we can retrieve it. There's a little bit of paperwork involved to do that, but it's possible. But a lot of those cabinets are empty now. We were already moving towards paperless, but DCAS was still designing offices for 30 years ago. So they have a little bit of catching up to do there, but we did the best we could to impress upon them that we were going in a paperless direction. So there's not a lot to do away with, and what there is there can easily be handled.
How much authority and leeway do we have in rearranging the space?
We'd need to check with DCAS on that. Some of it is just logistical right now. Like I've played around with those cabinets that are sitting behind the table that you're all at. They seem to be fused together somehow. Like I cannot get them to move apart. And then that big barrier that's between the table and those things, they got it in here somehow, but for the life of me, have not been able to take it apart. So, but before I go any further, we need to make sure that, we're allowed to do that. And
right.
So, but yeah, those are things that we need to do with DCAS. But yeah, to go back to this response, it is a little outdated at this point. We have submitted the form they asked.
Great. Yeah, Jesus, that would be super helpful if you could maybe just do a short blurb for us that we can include in our response when we put it together.
Sure. Sure.
Shall we move on to the
Yes.
next item? Okay. So we asked for a budget increase for the community board, and that was an observation of the fact that not all community boards are treated equally by the city
Right.
for some reason. So we're at one of the lowest budget numbers out there, and they've said, sorry,
Yeah, it's
the
already done.
budgets are what they are, and
Yeah.
that's, nobody's getting more or less than what they've asked for, so. Does anyone have any thoughts on the
How
response?
is the amount determined? Is it by population? Is it by, what is the determinant factor in how much money a community board gets?
So no one seems to be able to give us a straight answer on that. We thought it might be population, but we took the figures, the budget figures, and ranked them, and then took the population for each community district and ranked them, and there's no correlation. There's no rhyme or reason right now. What seems to be the best response so far, there's some district managers who have been at this maybe 2 or 3 times as long as I have. You know, their hypothesis is that at some point, all the amounts were the same, but as every community board is allowed to allocate its money differently, especially when it comes to personnel, and when personnel orders come down from the city that increase certain salaries by certain percentages, since all of them are different among all the boards, that means greater increases for certain boards and lesser ones for others.
Ah,
And then
okay.
they never went back to recalibrate it. That's the best that I can understand. But I got to say, even those explanations from some of those more experienced district managers don't quite make sense in my head. Um, you know, we're going to try and reach out to someone maybe a little higher up at OMB than our usual people there to see if they can sort of tell us why this is the case, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But
It doesn't, and how long have these numbers been the same?
what do you mean these numbers?
The numbers, have they, how
The
long have
numbers, they change, you know,
they?
nominally from year to year, but we haven't really had a meaningful increase in the time that I have been here. For 2 years, we had this sort of bizarre infusion of money, like $47,000, but it had a lot of limitations on it. You couldn't use it for staff because it was not baselined. You couldn't use it for lots of things. And so we used it to redesign our website. Now we have like the best community board website in the city, and other boards used it for other things, some of which made headlines for the wrong reasons and some of which did not. But that's not the ideal way to go. You know, if they're going to give us that money, they should give it to us, and we can rely on it every single year.
Go ahead, Dee.
So having worked with it on the budget for years, it really is a question of fantasy as to how the budgets are derived. But I also think you have to constantly ask for it, but you have to be realistic. With less federal funds coming to the city and everything else, it's not going to be something that we're going to see an increase. But I think, as Jesus knows, it's important to keep it front and center each year and just keep going back with it so we're not forgotten. And Jesus, good luck in getting more information out of OMB.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, should we also be talking to the borough president about this?
I was thinking the
Right,
same
because
thing.
it
Yeah.
should be fair, right? And so, and it's easier to get in touch with the borough president than OMB.
we do talk to the borough president. You know, every month, district managers have a meeting with the borough president's office. But you know, if some of you have ties yourselves with the borough president's office, it never hurts. You know, what I would like to see, honestly, is I have not had a chance to look at every other Manhattan board's district needs statement to see if they have a budget request for budget increases in their list. I hope they do. I've said when we've been together in the past, hey, all your boards need to try and pass this into their budget requests too, because until we're all unified and constantly beating this drum, we're not going to really get anywhere. I don't know if they have. Maybe someone on this committee can look at all the other district need statements and see if it's in there. And ideally, all 59 boards throughout the city will do the same. But I think it's going to have to come. I mean, there have been calls from various borough presidents, before this one and before that one and before this one, to like talk amongst themselves, but it never goes anywhere. Either there's no real um, uh, desire to push this forward, or they don't really seem to be hearing enough from the community boards or even the public. There's a lot of lip service paid to community boards getting more money, but nothing ever happens. So, I think it would be good to see more coordination starting with the Manhattan boards, and then emanating out from that to all the other boards in the city.
Shall we move on to the other requests? I'll suggest maybe we start with, because we did get a response from Stu, so no, I don't know if you want to read his response or want me to read it.
If you want to read it, since you're in person, I think it's just on that. If you like, why don't we pull up the request first? So, yeah.
I'm working on that. There we go. We're currently on the top capital request for the record.
So we want to filter on public safety.
Oh, so we're focusing on public safety right now specifically.
Yes.
Just a moment. I will have that ready in a second.
Brennan, it's an expense request. It's number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just about ready. There are actually 2 public safety requests.
So the response, we got 2 responses from Stu on behalf of the committee. So the first one is related to the request that shelter security be provided by police rather than
Private.
other types of providers, for given what the incident that happened there in 2022. So let me just read what the Public Safety Committee sent us. So subsequent to a murder in 2022 at the New Providence Women's Shelter, the New York City Department of Homeland Services has declined each of multiple requests to meet with Manhattan Community Board 6. On information and belief, security at that shelter was then and is still provided by contract security officers, and the murder weapon, a knife, slipped past their screening. Meanwhile, it is the view of the local NYPD leadership, based on experience, that DHS police officers provide more competent security than do private contractors. So the response by DHS, effectively, that DHS police are not necessary because the agency adjusts security as needed, is belied by events. The agency's reference to a provider assistance unit, about which there appears to be nothing on the DHS or any other website, is of no comfort considering past failures. Community Board 6 continues to request that DHS take the opportunity to join us for a discussion or respond to our questions, at which time the agency might persuade us that our budget request should not be renewed. So that was their take on this. I think it probably needs more discussion between public safety and.
So what you just read was Stu's email to you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
As far as like
Yeah.
what we might use it toward a response about this request. But it sounds like there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of what their committee thinks and the what the city's agency is telling us about this new unit.
Yeah.
So I think he gave us the material we need to
Yeah.
craft a response unless anybody has anything else to add.
So they use private security to handle the security in the shelters. Is that correct?
It's not DHS police.
It's not DHS police. That must add a lot of expense to them. We're paying for private security.
Or at least it's not, just to interject since I liaise with public safety, or at least it's not used at all of the shelters. Like at some of the shelters, DHS police is used, but in the case of the shelter where, the murder happened back in 2022, we heard that it was private security rather than DHS police. So, that was also a factor. And then, of course, hearing from the local NYPD precinct that, as Stu's email said, that, at least in NYPD's view, security is better when there's DHS police rather than private security.
I don't think
Yeah.
so. Do we
Go
know
ahead.
what percentage?
B,
Oh, so go ahead.
So having run offices where we had to use private security instead of federal police, I will tell you, it's always a step down with private security. But the problem is the budgeting for police is very high. And so they do save money. But my question to us is, of the shelters in the city, how many have DHS police? And how
Yeah.
many have contracts? So we
Yeah.
know that, are we among 10 or 20? I mean, it's important to know how the policy is in shelters in the city.
yeah, we can perhaps include that in our response and or ask the public safety committee to follow up with DHS directly to find out.
Yeah, it's always good to have numbers. You know, once you have numbers and statistics and you know how
Yeah.
many are DHS, how many are private, and of those private, how many incidents have occurred as opposed to DHS. I think, you know, statistics are a great way to keep track. It's facts. As opposed to speculation as to who would do better or who would do worse. So if we can ask for some documentation and some numbers, that would really help.
Budget.
They probably allocate it based on the demographics of the resident population. I would suspect that women are probably deemed to be less dangerous, less likely to cause an incident in a shelter than a men's shelter, such as 34th Street. Age of the population will also factor in. So I think, you know, DHS shelter security is very likely at the highest risk shelters, men in their 20s to, you know, 30s, 35. That's where you end up having trouble, usually.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think the one tension I'm trying to balance here is we don't want to get too deep into the issue because it's not really our sort of coverage. So I think based on what we're discussing, my inclination, and curious if folks think about it, is really to, first of all, to Stu's request, just like really put explicitly just a request for DHS to like come and meet with either that committee or the board as a whole, as well as provide further details on that decision. And then separately, we can ask Stu to see, sort of get additional information. But I think really, to me, so we don't like as a budget committee get too in the weeds on a public safety request. I think it's really just requesting that information and then just really reiterating Stu's request for DHS to come meet with that committee.
Yeah. Okay, and then the only other request that the public safety committee had simply was regarding the frequency of trash pickups, and they said they didn't have the budget, so Stu said it.
No.
Yeah.
That was a.
He said they can discuss it further as a committee, but you know,
Yeah, it's a firm
there's not
no.
really anything to respond to there other than resubmit the request.
Yeah.
Or use other avenues. And that, I think, Nat, I think we didn't get any other comments from other committees directly. Is that true?
That's right. So LV, so health and health said that they don't want, there's something they want to respond to. So we can look at the top 10 and just make sure anything that we want to respond to is done. And then
Yeah.
Neil from Parks said the same thing. And then I did not hear from any of the other committees.
Okay. So maybe just look at the top 10 here and then see if there's anything else we want to add.
Yeah, that's what I'm inclined to do, because I know like when we sorted these were sort of our top 10, factoring
Right.
in what we thought. So I think those are like sort of most important to us. And we also
Okay.
discussed them in the fall, so we all have some context.
So go ahead and open the first one, Brendan. So obviously housing was our top request, affordable housing, they say they agree. And that they're maximizing the use of what they have available to provide that kind of housing in our district. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on this. The only global comment I will say about a lot of the requests that we got in the responses, which was different from before, was they've asked us to remove all the requests, which I think we need to sort of just have on the record, say, well, we keep requests on there to keep track of them. And that, if once it becomes funded, we move it to continuous support.
Right.
And then only once an issue no longer is valid or for our district, or it is completely completed, at that point we remove it. But that's just kind of how internally housekeeping, that's kind of how our committee takes care of it. So.
Yeah, I thought it was surprising. I'd never seen that before too, that you take it off. I also find this surprising, but oh yeah, we're working on this, because does anyone else here know where that affordable housing is coming up? I haven't heard about it. And just as, like about 7% of the city budget comes from federal money, 30% of HPD budget is from federal money though. So a lot of that, if that gets cut. Yeah, so I'm not hopeful about this.
This is the elephant in the room, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah, we have a big elephant in the room, no pun intended.
We should probably explain our housekeeping to them so that they don't think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, we'll do something, because it applies to almost all of their, not just this
Yeah, so we
one,
should
but-
respond in the letter, just saying that that's why we do it. But I would want more information on this, that where is that affordable housing, has it started,
I've also been advocating for means testing affordable housing so that, you don't have people who are making, $200,000 and $300,000 a year salaries living in an affordable unit that they acquired when they were 22.
They do that on a regular basis?
Huh?
Don't they do that on a regular
Rent
basis?
control,
they don't.
yeah,
Once you're in there, you're in.
once you're in there, you're in.
And, then you buy the house in the Hamptons while you live in a cheap Manhattan apartment. There's several instances of it that
I
have
know,
come to light
upset.
over the
I
years.
have upset, I know upset.
Any other comments on this one before we move to the next one? Okay, let's move on to number 2. Public bathroom facilities. So they said they do not support, but they can address it alternatively. And so they've identified several complications with the site at 34th Street. If you can move down a little bit. They're planning to build something GDC is planning to build a bathroom for Parks and Playground at 18th Street and Avenue C. It's currently under procurement. And now DOT is considering other location and is willing to collaborate with us to identify other sites. So I think it's up to the relevant committee to then.
18th and Avenue
Outreach.
C was promised. I don't know, when my boys were little, my boys are.
Because didn't they buy those porta potty, like the toilets, the automatic toilets they're talking about, they actually bought them, but then the installation and that's been a
Yeah, it
problem.
was under Bloomberg, as I
Yeah.
remember.
For whatever reason, they didn't
Yeah.
respond to that. I mean,
Yeah.
that was definitely in our request specifically to say like, we understand that, but they didn't
And why
respond.
are these so far to the east? I mean, there's nothing in Midtown. 34th Street is the river. 18th and Avenue C is basically the river, and the third one is also the river. I mean, you're gonna get a lot more foot traffic in 2nd, 3rd Avenue. Lexington, you know, at the border of our CD.
Yeah,
Says they're open to considering other locations and is willing to collaborate with community board to identify suitable sites. And we have the one at Madison Square Park. Right at the base of Madison Avenue. Be nice to have something in, you know, Second, Third Avenue, and maybe something further uptown too. These are all below 34th Street.
yeah, I mean, again, I think it's up to the committee that put the request in to then dig down and to see where they
Yeah.
might suggest sites.
Which committee is doing this one?
This
It's
is part.
DOT, so
Park
Okay,
site.
one is DOT.
I don't know if it's transportation, but yeah. Okay,
Well, the committee listed as housing and
okay.
homelessness.
Oh.
Housing was the one that put it out,
Yes.
okay. So it's. We can ask them to look through that further.
Yeah.
Let's move to the next one. Supportive housing,
Which is basically the same as the housing.
Yeah.
There was one.
they'll continue to fund construction from available resources, is essentially what they said, so. They haven't given us more detail about it, again, we can sort of say more detail would be helpful to understand if there's actually something in the pipeline.
How do these tie into the city of Yes and all of that?
What do you mean by that?
Like if the city of Yes is meant to provide, you know, more housing and affordable housing and such. Doesn't this tie in?
This is a specific kind of housing.
It is a
supportive housing.
specific, no, the affordable before, but this is. Supportive housing is for people with disabilities and such.
It's also people who are coming, mental health issues, substance
Mental
abuse
health.
issues.
Right.
Yeah, so to
Okay.
provide the support that.
Oh, okay.
Provides a range of.
Right,
That was the-
services,
Right,
yeah.
it was the previous one I was thinking about,
Yeah.
sorry,
This is something different than that.
that's a different, okay.
So I don't think there's there's nothing, I mean, we know it's a need, we don't know how. We don't have any more specifics around how they're intending to fill that need, but we can keep it on here and
Yeah.
come back to it. Okay, let's move to the next one. Again, another housing one. Related to housing for seniors. Agency supports and can accommodate. They would like to hear from the board on potential locations where supportive housing can be located. And ask if we're in touch with specific owners, property owners interested in providing this types of senior housing projects. It would welcome connections. And or encouragement for them to contact HPD for an intake meeting. So again, I think this is sort of incumbent on the housing committee
Yeah.
to follow up and make any kind of additional requests or connections.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this one? Okay, we can move to the next one. ADA compliant subway stations. Does not support, cannot accommodate. Please contact agency directly and promptly for more information. This would be up to the transportation committee to follow up with.
But what's surprising about this is that we are required to have subway stations. I mean, they are retrofitting, right, because of for ADA. So I don't understand this response because like 59th Street, they're trying to, put an elevator in. So this does not, match with what the MTA is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long-term,
Unless we don't care about ADA anymore.
There's a-
Maybe we don't
yeah.
actually.
there's a long-term capital
Yeah.
plan, right,
Yeah,
that was
maybe-
put into
maybe
place,
there's no
but
legal
like,
consequences
we don't really
to
know.
Yeah.
this, yeah,
I've been thinking about
that, that's true,
Capital plan is.
yeah.
Brendan?
The other thing I'll say is as I was
There's also no
putting
concern
in,
for ADA anymore, so yeah.
as I was putting in agency responses to these various budget requests, I was paying attention to patterns. And this was a common MTA response with request to them in general, so. I don't know if there's too much to glean.
Right.
As a result from their
It's probably
saying.
just a formulaic response. Okay, go ahead, Nat.
We have to do ADA compliance.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Brendan, I don't know if you cover transportation, but I know that like the response here has been for a long time, like, please contact the agency. Do you know if Transpo has ever contacted? Like, I assume they have contacted the agency about this, and like I'm trying to think of like what's the next step, because like looking at like the requests, like, you know, FY23, FY25, like a lot of them have been that. So I'm just not sure if like we should include something that's sort of like we have contacted them and something. I'm just not sure what the dialogue is like.
What I can do, I don't know, but what I can do is that since I liaise with the transportation committee, I can definitely talk with transportation committee leadership about these requests and see how we want to go about following up with MTA.
Okay.
So I'll discuss that with, Jason and Barack on the transportation committee.
Cool. Thank you.
We had followed up many years ago, like around the start of the pandemic, because it does seem like this request really only kind of pops up around budget request season time. And you know, at the time we asked MTA, can you like help us with like, can you tell us your plans for this, or can you tell us when you might be discussing this, you know, on your own time or something? And you know, the what they were offering is like, well, you guys can always watch our board meetings, and you can read our capital plan, and you can this, you can that, and so you know, maybe they'll be more helpful this time around, but they essentially were telling us like, you guys just look for the information yourselves. So I forget which member it was who said this, but like, yeah, maybe the committee needs to see, is this something that it actually wants to prioritize? And if it is, then we find a way to to maybe we liaise with MTA again, or we find a way to dig up this information ourselves.
Go ahead, B.
So I do have a question, Jesus, and Brendan. Wasn't there a court order that they had to do this by a certain time?
At 2030, that's what I thought.
And so they had to designate how many in what area or stuff? Is that, do you remember if that was public?
Are you talking about the court order on ADA compliance and subway stations?
Right.
So don't quote me on this, but if I remember correctly, the answer is yes, but with a little caveat, which is that if there's like some sort of, I forget exactly how it was written, but that if there is some sort of issue with MTA funding, that there's an out for MTA, which, you know, could be a little bit tricky given the questions as to the future of congestion pricing with everything in between. So, yes.
Yeah, that's, if I
More
recall,
or
that
less.
that is correct, because when Kathy Hochul put a pause on congestion pricing, I think there was a lawsuit brewing from ADA on behalf of the
Yeah, because
media
the money
compliance,
was
saying
for these
that
subways.
basically
Was coming from
it
that.
was against the ruling to not go ahead with it, because that would remove the funding that
Yeah.
was gonna be for the ADA compliance. But in any case, yeah, it's all about funding, so it remains to be seen whether or not they're gonna be able to adhere to.
Yeah, and even with the
plan.
current congestion pricing plan is less than what they expected, so they may not have enough funds because it's something like 6 million per elevator or something, right?
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. This came from the Parks Committee.
And somewhat shockingly, they're saying that we have a new park in the district.
Yeah, they said they're working with EDC to transform the parking lot at 34th Street into a recreation space available to the community. I don't know if Parks Committee was aware of that, but.
I'm on the Parks Committee, I had not heard about it, I had not heard about it, that's why I was shocked.
This is something that we've been working on behind the scenes.
Okay.
And why pass it?
Go ahead,
Jesus.
Jesus.
This is something we've been working on behind the scenes for several years now, actually. The space that's being talked about, that sort of, you know, nasty little parking lot on 34th and the river, is city property. And the board has for many, many, many years thought that it could be better utilized for the public good as open space and not as a parking lot, especially right there on the river. And so we have been working with the city to try and get them to take that space back and repurpose it. And after plugging away and plugging away and plugging away and going on a sort of hunt for the lease for this thing and all kinds of, and talking with various agencies all over the city, we seem to be making some progress. So this is the first time we've seen it actually in writing, but we've certainly had a lot of meetings behind the scenes on this. So we didn't mention it to the board widely because we didn't want to jinx anything. We were asked not to say anything before anything was settled. But yeah, there is, we have been working on this for quite some time.
Great, thank you, that's great.
And it's passive space, Jesus?
The space is small, so, you're not going to have a central park there, So I think it's far too early days to say anything like that, but almost certainly it would be just, some benches, something like that.
Hey, Susan, is this the space that's next to the
The
Watershed
river-
Plaza?
yeah, the water-
Sorry,
Thing that was.
the abandoned, what is it called?
Yeah.
Yeah, the water club.
The water club,
Yeah,
by the water club?
yeah, between the helicopter thing and the water.
And the water club, okay.
Yeah.
It's north.
North of that.
Well, the helicopter heliport is north of the water club, and north of the heliport is this space.
Yeah. It's right off the ferry. Just to the south
Yes.
of the.
Yeah.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
So great news.
That's
Yeah.
great news.
We can
See?
move, move to the next one.
Yeah, and we already had the new wave park, which was not that, we got like 2 parks.
Yeah, so you may have heard me allude to it very cryptically in the past, but yeah, that's what this is. And also proof that literally these things take years sometimes to do, and lots and lots and lots and lots of persistent follow-up, which is, one of the reasons we, at least I try to say less is more with these, because if every single one of these takes that kind of dogged follow-up, it'll be 100 years before we get through all of them.
Okay, next 7 we already spoke about, so we can move to 8. Seawall reconstruction for East River. Says agency is supportive and can accommodate. Design work has been completed in June. Project is currently in the post-design phase. Construction is expected to begin fall of 2026 and last for 18 months. It notes that it will structurally repair the waterfront bulkhead, but does not include topside improvements. So the existing sinkholes will need to be addressed separately. But overall, it seems to be a positive response to this request.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has anything else to add.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one. Access to the East River Esplanade. They support but cannot accommodate. They ask us to resubmit the request.
Is this land use?
Access to water.
No, this is also, this should be from
I think
parks,
it's
because
parks.
parks,
Also?
because
Yeah.
we've talked about
Okay.
this a lot in parks.
So they're just saying they'll
Yeah, and
look and
there's all
see.
kinds of technical issues as to why they can't get the water.
So probably for something for parks to keep on its radar.
Yeah. And the Parks Department does come to every one of the meetings and they need to update,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Any other comments? Okay, on the next one.
Oh, that's the same one.
Yeah.
But all the water stuff got the same response, I feel.
Per cuts.
Oh, this came from transportation, yeah. Remediate drainage for curb cuts, agency supports and can accommodate. So they reference a pedestrian ramp program, which has construction at many different sites in the city. They have 1.2 billion fund capital pedestrian ramp contract fully through FY31. And they have a program progress map on their website. So I don't know, this would be, again, something for, I think, the transportation committee to look at that information and that response and see if there's anything that requires follow-up, or if they want to identify other locations that have not already been identified on the map.
They should test them for drainage. Open a fire hydrant nearby or something, because a lot of these curb cuts end up getting flooded in heavy rains, and they're impossible if somebody's in a wheelchair or whatever to get by it.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Moving on to the next one. Is that thing will be the last one? Is that the last one?
That's the
That's
top
top
10
10,
capital requests,
Right.
but they're also expense requests. Don't know if you want to do top 10 expense requests.
I don't think we have.
Capital improvements at Stuyvesant Park. Oh, that's 11.
That's
Yeah.
11. Yeah, we do have like a separate list of, we have a list of expense requests.
Let's just take a look quickly
Let's
to
take
see
a
what they
look,
are.
yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, a couple of these with public safety, the committee has already looked at.
Yeah, the two of them that we did.
Additional traffic enforcement officers, agency does not support, cannot accommodate. Please contact agency. Okay, I mean, that's something that that particular committee would have to follow up on.
And additional F officers, that's parks.
Okay, so they support the request. They assign PEP officers to address changing needs in parks. I mean, it's not clear again, because we don't have the data, the information to know.
No, and what they've
what's the
said-
allocation here, but.
Yeah, and what they've said in the meeting is that, go ahead, we can get the PEP officers, but it'll take time because they need the officers, like, to free up their time from other work that they're doing. Cause then, there'll be certain times where they'll be in one park, certain times in another park.
So it's not a fixed program, it's just sort of rolling and random?
So I'm not clear on that, but
Not
this
clear
has
on
been
that?
discussed, yeah, that they are open to it, but they need the manpower to do the work.
Meaning they need to hire more people.
People, yes, yeah.
And that becomes a budget
Well, budget
issue.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that becomes a budget issue.
All right.
Something that might be good to try, because some of these issues are very much like we either don't have the information or we don't know enough about the background processes involved to really speak intelligently about it. Like maybe with some of these, like some of the ones that are seem the most perplexing, like go in there, maybe send to the office, like, what questions do you have? Like, even if it's like the most rudimentary, like, I don't know how this works. Knowing how this works would help me understand how we can better alter this.
Yeah,
That might be something worth trying, because at some point we're going to have to, as with the case with that park, it really started with like whenever we met an obstacle and we had to figure something out, we took a few steps back, figured it out, and then that's how we made that progress. So a lot of these things you just have to sort of peel back layers and layers and layers until we figure out. Because if we're expecting them to do the research for us, they're never going to do it. They're just not. So just an idea.
yeah, we should have the questions for the committees,
Right.
right, and say, if they may not have responded, they have any changes, we're like, well, we have these questions for you,
Yeah.
for them.
Also, I think it's gonna come when we go through this budgeting process again next year, we can be perhaps more precise with some of the committees about getting data, figures, facts to back up what the requests
Yeah.
are. Okay, next one.
Okay, this one was
Yeah,
already
we already
done.
discussed.
It's recently.
This was for homeless services.
Mhm.
At DHS drop-in centers, clients can access specialized services that meet immediate needs. Supports what cannot accommodate, resubmit. I mean, again, it's probably a budgetary.
It's a budgetary.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
this is a big request because they want it to basically do everything, like give them food, help find a job, have showers.
Okay, I don't think our committee has anything else to
Yeah.
add to this one. And then the support services for seniors. Some funds have been provided, agency does not support, cannot accommodate. They don't understand the request, so I think this is one where the committee would need to look at their request and maybe articulate better what they're asking for.
Well, in that one, we were sort of complimenting a recognition of it, but we really didn't ask for anything.
Yeah, when I read this one again, I was also somewhat confused on the language is a little vague, so I think the committee can tighten up the request on that one.
I just had
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
question on the item before. I wanted to know if there are certain centers that have been established where the homeless can take advantage of certain facilities and certain counseling. Is there an awareness? Because first one of our other points, we were asking for an expansion on that, and they're stating they have certain things that are already available. Is there any sort of study that shows that actually the homeless know where these centers are, where they can get these particular services?
I'm not aware about, this isn't an issue that I'm familiar with. I don't know if
Yeah,
anybody
so I
in the
mean,
committee is.
again, not an expert, but what I can say is DHS on any given day has around 400 people who are out talking to homeless people, seeing if people who are street homeless and see if they need a shelter, if they can be helped. And then once a year, when they do the survey, which just went by, the Project Hope thing, 4,000 volunteers are out there talking, and I volunteered for that, and we talked to homeless people, and we like, do you have services, do you need it? You know, and tell them about the resources that are available specifically to the area where we see them, like, you know, they're in the Bryant Park, there's a bunch of homeless people in that area, we say, there's shelters near here, you can do it.
Can we move on to the next?
Yeah, so this was already discussed, so is this one.
Yeah, we already discussed that. This is hire more staff for parks, that's a budgetary issue, so they say they are supportive but cannot accommodate, resubmit. Again, either for the committee to do more. Lobbying work on that.
Yeah.
And figuring out the resources or resubmit. Comments. Okay, let's move to the next one. Increase funding for HPD. They said they've increased the headcount of that division and will continue to support tenants throughout the city.
So then it's
So,
the committee, do they
yeah.
feel that it's still
Yeah.
not sufficient?
Up to the committee to decide if
Yeah.
it's enough or they don't agree.
Yeah.
Next one.
No, that is the same one.
Traffic studies. Agency does not support, but can address alternatively. And they request additional information from the community board. So this is again one where the committee needs to have a dialogue with
Too
the
bad I'm not on that committee. This
with
is
the
something
DOT.
this is something that is dear to my heart.
How do they know they can address the need?
Anyone is welcome to
alternative?
go to the committee meeting.
I know, I might.
Okay, good.
How do they know they can address the need alternatively if they don't understand what the request is?
Yeah, I was thinking that too, like, I'm like, have you
Yeah.
already done this study?
Well, it's a study,
Yeah.
so perhaps there's enough information in the request, they can feel like they can answer it,
Maybe
but
they are.
yeah,
Brendan
hard to
has.
know. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, one thing I'll say, since you expressed an interest in this issue, Tanya, is I see that this request was directed at DOT,
Uh-huh.
and we do have a DOT representative at all of our transportation committee meetings.
Oh, fantastic.
So
I
maybe
might,
it's,
I might join the next one.
yeah, I mean, you can let Jason and Brock know, just so that they're
Yeah, I'll
aware,
let them know.
but,
Of course.
but yeah, that might be a place to start. I don't know if I'd be surprised if she were to have an answer on the fly, but at least getting that conversation going.
Okay, we can move on to the next. Tenant production, right to council funding. Supports and can accommodate. Funding is in place to provide legal services to tenants facing eviction. So again, this is up to the community to decide, is it sufficient, not sufficient, is it meeting the need? Okay, next one.
That was not what I meant
That
to
was
do.
it.
But that was the top 10 expense
Okay.
requests.
Yeah. Are there any other ones that anyone has a burning desire to speak about from the list of requests that we did not already discuss?
There's a Sutton, Place Parks request. If you could take a look at it, because they came to the Parks meeting last week.
Are you talking about this one?
Was it the
Yes.
capital request? Okay.
Yes, so this time they came though just to ask for fixing of the tree bed. And not this full one, so the response to this was,
A bench was thrown into the East River.
yeah,
Supports but cannot accommodate resubmit. It's partially funded. We're seeking the balance of funding.
yeah. I mean, I just wanted to read that because the community group actually came to the board to.
Go ahead, B.
Yeah, so I was gonna wait till you finish this thing. I wanted to make a general comment.
Okay. Any other comments about the park? No, go ahead, B.
So in looking at all of the responses, we get things like we've increased the funds, we've provided more, but we don't know, unless the committee knows, what's the base and what's the increase. So I would hope that when we talk about next year and stuff, there's the fact finding that gives us some details, because I could say on anything, I've increased the funding, but if it's a 0.5% and not providing anything, you have to go back at it. So I think we need more factual information from the committees.
Yeah, that's a very good point, B. And as we get, I think this first year we focused on cleaning up the requests and really winnowing them down so they're aligned with what we really want to spend our time on.
Mm-hmm.
The next phase of this is getting even better, more well-articulated requests.
Yeah.
So that the city, and hopefully, this is a first round of a good series of responses from this, better responses than we've ever received
Yeah, I thought it was.
on many of our requests, but we can continue to fine tune them as we look at these details and perhaps get even better
Yeah,
responses.
and something we talked about last year, is that we should have the committee chairs come to a meeting and present to us their requests, so we can get these explanations.
I think.
We
that's a
we
great
tried.
idea.
Oh,
We
you
did
tried?
try.
Okay,
We offered
yeah,
them to either come, we asked them to,
yeah,
go through the request, but I think it's a challenge to,
yeah.
with all the other committee business and all the other agenda items that they have, it's kind of a challenge with the timeline to get them to
Yeah, to
respond.
make
but
it to come,
go ahead.
because I only found out like 2 years ago when we were doing this, that it used to be a time that the budget committee was just chairs of all the other committees, and then they used to be, and so now it's different, and so we don't always know what's happening.
Right.
That's exactly, I was
Yeah.
just thinking that, it's funny you bring it up, so I was just thinking, well, why aren't they involved here, the chairs?
Yeah, in my mind, actually, the exec committee should actually just be the one that's doing this because they already have every.
Oh, yeah, everybody's already there.
Right.
Well,
Committee
I'm
chair.
surprised it's not discussed more in executive,
Yeah,
So it should be an agenda item on the executive, actually.
Yeah.
All of these questions we have should be brought up at exec, and then,
yeah.
yeah,
Let's do it. Nat, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the idea of bringing it up to exec. You can definitely bring it up next meeting. I think the other thing is, Steve, to your point, I think one of the benefits I was gonna say almost exactly what you said. Like one of the benefits of whittling down the request is we get more detailed responses. And I think this tells us how to better respond in the future because now they're saying like to your point, like, oh, we've increased funding. Now we can come back next year and be like, look, you increased funding by 0.5%, but incidents have gone up 8%. Like that kind of needs to match. I think it's good that we're getting those responses so we are actually better able to have it's going to be a slow dialogue, but at least somewhat of a dialogue in a more in-depth way than in previous years where we just get the, either supports or does not support kind of response.
Yep.
I had a question. There are a number of responses where the agency does not agree with what's been submitted. And they say, well, you can contact for more information, but if it's no, 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 and there are a lot of no's, I mean, I like some of the explanations, but some of it says no and then contact. There seems to me that we need more follow-up after the no. And they're saying, take it off the list. If it hasn't been there for 15 years and they say no, it seems to me that there should be a process where we follow up on that. Is there any suggestion or how would we do that?
Well, I think we have tried to, like, with Steve's point, like we've cut a lot of things back. And so everything that's on this list right now, and there were things that we said we wanted to cut, but the committee themselves said we want to keep here. And so the question now is going back to the committee and saying, okay, they said, no, can we take it off? Or do you want to talk to this agency and make your case for why this should be a budget request?
Also, there seems to be a number of requests coming from the Parks Committee.
Yeah, it's the largest number of requests.
No, the largest number.
I noticed.
And I find that very interesting because aesthetically, we need a lot of these things, but in terms of, I'll say, individual residents in our community, and particularly with seniors and homeless, I don't see as many requests regarding human beings, so to speak. And so I wondered if there's a reason why there isn't more participation or what's happening with the committees that head those issues. Are they submitting, as we hoped, their requests? Because there is a lopsided number in terms of what's coming out of one committee. Can you tell me? Is there less participation?
It's really up to each committee to decide how they want to handle their requests. And some committees do more on the resolutions side. They feel like that's where they focus their energies on writing resolutions and using, there's different ways to advocate for your issues, and so budget is one of them, but there are other avenues. And so it's just a matter of, we can't tell the committees you need to have X number of requests, or you're not, the only thing we do is we help prioritize and we help winnow out. We help this year, of course, to lead a lot of requests. So
just kind of reiterating what B was talking about, and something I've urged for years is we should try to get some level of specificity, like particularly things like more affordable housing. How many units? Look at, I mean, we have the census tracts, we have the income levels. Break down the numbers, how many extra units do we have? And that way, when we do ask for something and they come back and say, well, we'll fund it, we can hold them to a higher, to a number, to an accountable number. And we've never been able to do that.
You're right. Yeah.
We've never been able to do that.
It's like we have Sandy.
That's something homeless, housing and homeless should be doing.
So we have a comment from Sandy. Sandy, go ahead.
And apologies, I'm just coming late to the discussion, but I really understand what you're saying, but I think part of the problem is that the other committees don't understand what the role is of these budget requests. So it may be a little bit of back and forth that, you need chairs to come to your meeting, but someone from the budget committee needs to step to sort of clarify the process with each of the committees. And I think what the goal was to have, the budget committee be composed of someone from each of the committees. So maybe you have to be kind of develop some kind of a strategy for how people go about doing a budget request and then present it to each of the committees individually. And we probably have to start a lot sooner because, people put it off. I know I go to a lot of the land use and waterfront committee meetings, and I don't think they realize what they can actually be advocating for as part of the budget process. So we need a little more education on both sides, I think.
Go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah. Would it be worthwhile, Sandy, to have some sort of workshops?
Absolutely, if that's
that. Yeah. And
And-
it's just concrete and say, there's 3 workshops within the next 3 months or whatever, and then do it that way. But we should really have some workshops where it's hands on deck type of thing.
But I think we need this committee to come up with the documentation of what the process is, what kind of things people can ask for. I know, for instance, the comment about the housing committee, they're actually now going through trying to do this analysis of what we need in the district. But
Didn't Nat send something around
That's
earlier?
what I was.
Yeah,
gonna
sorry, I
ask.
was going to say, we put together a documentation that we've presented. I think part of the difficulty, just like for new members of the committee, is getting other committee members, to Sandy's point, to sort of understand how this is impactful, because we put out that documentation, which walks through both how to submit this request, the timeline, things like that. I think what ends up happening, though, to Sandy's point, is that folks end up not doing it in the spring. They put it off. It comes back. We come back from summer, and then they sort of rush it through and don't spend a lot of time. So I think it's a work in progress, where I think we did make progress this year, to Steve's point, on really cutting it down. I think it just requires us to keep hammering the other committees like how beneficial a process this is. And I think part of the thing that makes me feel more encouraged about it is this year getting the better responses shows that it's not just this thing we're tossing into the ether. There's really some progress being made here. And I think hopefully that will get folks to take it sort of more seriously and do some more prep in the spring versus the historical pattern where they've sort of done it in that first meeting when they come back for the summer. But it's a continuing thing where we have documentation. If folks haven't seen it, I'm happy to email it to you. We
Yes.
did it last year. Yeah, I
But-
can send it out. I can get Brendan to send it out to the committee just so everybody has it. So that's something we started to work on, and we can continue to develop it over time. But it's something that Steve and I and the rest of the committee had started working on last year.
Great.
Sandy, you have something else to add?
Yes, sorry, just that, for instance, we had, I think, 12 new members last year. So it's something that we constantly have to reiterate, I believe. And I'm not sure, like Tanya is a first-year member, whether you feel you got a very good description of what the budget process is. And so maybe, it's great that we have the documentation, but maybe that idea of a workshop, or at least
Yeah. I think so.
reinforcing it, because it is a really important part of how we advocate for things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we can add more detail to that document. That was last year was kind of the first year we rolled it out, just to see how it would work. It did provide some context and some help in terms of getting our requests down, getting them to be more specific. And so I think we can work on that further. I'm a little skeptical that people are going to have time to attend a workshop.
Yeah.
I mean, Nat and I sent the budget responses to all the committee chairs more than 2 weeks ago, and we didn't get a response from almost anybody about these requests. And just today, I would say within this afternoon, we started to get a couple of responses just before our meeting. So people really do wait until the last minute, and that's not helpful because we're scrambling. But I think it's kind of both ways. We need to remind committees, we need to give them more time, we need to give more guidance, but they also need to participate and pay attention to their emails.
Like the NHL, you need an enforcer.
And do we have enough time to review this at exec? Like if to get into this cycle of comments, if we do it, it's in a week Wednesday, so.
Brendan, correct me, but I think it's due the 15th, so this Saturday.
We don't have time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, that said, like, there's nothing wrong with exec talking, like, in generalities about the processes and stands and, like, making sure that, like, committee chairs know what they need to do and, like, us making sure that we provide committee chairs the resources they need to do what they need to do. Like, that's not contingent upon the February 15th deadline for responding to the preliminary budget.
And empower the vice chairs, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Chairs are very busy, but vice chairs not so much.
Okay.
They could be
B,
tasked to do more.
let's go with B and then Jamie.
So I was going to suggest, I think what we went through with the top 10 items from each one of them, I think it would be great to make that available to the chairs and the committees, because it can show what we were looking at, the questions we had. So I don't think it should just be on YouTube or the public. I think we should use this internally and make our colleagues know it's available and it can help them enhance their requests. I thought our discussion on each of the responses was excellent.
Great.
Yeah,
David?
following up on what B just said, I think we could, just slightly improve our internal operation on this, and like whether it's a 10-minute tutorial at full board, like,
Right.
briefly here and there, like just bringing it up so that it's fresh, or we take like a full half an hour at a meeting when there's not a lot of business to attend to, so we can actually educate and make it a part of our everyday operations rather than like a once a year thing, because it is so important to, I think, the board's function. It kind of makes sense to have something that is constantly front of mind rather than like rushing to like get people to interact with something.
Yeah,
Go
I just
ahead,
wanna,
Reshma.
I wanted to add, I mean, first of all, Nad and Steve have done an amazing job with this and, what you created last year, but as somebody who's chaired the committee before, I mean, starting in January, when this came out, I would start emailing people. I would take the top 10, I'd say, this is the response, email it to people, and I would add exec, bring up, put this on your agendas, but it still wouldn't happen until September, when we're gonna have the public meeting. So all the stuff that's been discussed here, aside from doing a workshop, we've discussed, I realized, wait, there's new chairs, there's new members, and then we talk to people. And the reason why there's a lot of park requests is because I've been on the Parks Committee for a long time, and I was also Budget Committee, so it just ended up happening, then we ended up having, there were already a lot of parks requests even before I got involved, but part of the reason there's so much parks is because I've been on both those committees, and so we need the same thing for people from other committees to be on budget, so we understand what those
Yeah.
requests are coming in.
Sandy, I have one other suggestion, and that is perhaps you can ask, what we have to figure out what the timing is, but ask that budget requests be an agenda item for people's committee meetings. Because I know on my own committee that I sit on, it was never a budget request, never came up until I brought it up and I said, hi, I'm on the budget committee and I know there are budget requests and we need to talk about this, but it was never an item on the committee's agenda. So that's a problem.
But we can add it to the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It doesn't have to be every meeting, but I'm just saying.
Jesus it doesn't look happy about that, but I mean,
That'd be great. That would be great. It's just that some people skip the script, and we need
Yeah.
to.
we need to, we'll slap them around,
That's it, bring out your ruler, Sandy.
I didn't-
yeah, the gravel.
I'd be happy if budget requests were a standing item on all the agendas every
Right.
single. Like, even look at the number of requests we actually have currently. Hopefully that number does not creep back up, because we're not adding more is not going to help. But even if you did one every month at exec, you discussed budget requests, that's like 4 requests every exec. And throughout the year, eventually you'll touch all of them. So it is perfectly doable if people just don't leave it all to the last minute.
Well, we'll definitely add it to exec, but I think we need to add it to the committees as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So let's add to exec, for this upcoming exec, we will add a discussion of CB6 budget requests. We'll leave it vague for now. And, you know, you can sort of you can outline your expectations for the committee chairs, and then we can also talk about some nitty-gritty of individual requests.
And Nad, you can present again the description of what we do with budget requests. Or maybe I'll talk to you before so we can kind of stream.
Yeah, we probably do it like once in like the spring at some point, and then again in the fall just to continue pushing it. But I think it's just like a lot of the ideas we're discussing are really good of just like continuing to hammer this home throughout the year. So it's not just this thing that people hear about in the spring, say they're going to do in the fall, and then forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So to close it out, I think, I think Nat and I will craft sort of the response of gathering all of this information, and we'll work with the office to submit that in relation to these particular budget requests.
And since Saturday, so the 15th is a Saturday, and the Monday after is a city holiday, if you need like until the Tuesday after, you can, the OMB will take it.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Oh, it's a holiday month.
Great.
Yeah, President's Day.
Yeah, President's Day. Oh, what do you do?
Early this year.
So do we have any, on the next agenda item, do we have any chair's report? Ned?
Sorry. No, I'll waive the report. I think a lot of it is these ideas. And one thing I would say is, as you guys are thinking of other ways to like continue to reinforce the budget sort of like relevance of committees, feel free to email me and Steve about it, but no actual chair's report today.
Great. Any other old, new business? Okay. If there are no objections, we will adjourn the meeting. Okay. The meeting is adjourned at 7:59 p.m.
Yeah.